so that we never forget what happened. I hope you will join us and do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to topical questions. Question number 1, Ken-Macintosh.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the report in the Herald on the 20th of January 2014 on the pay of university principals.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, as autonomous institutions, salary levels of principals and other senior staff are of course a matter for each institution's governing body and remuneration committee. However, I expect senior university management and governing bodies to demonstrate clear leadership and accountability by ensuring that pay awards to principals are not out of step with those available to staff, and to ensure the highest standards of transparency as recommended by the von Pronzinski Review of Higher Education Governance. I will re-emphasise that point at the next meeting of the University Sector Advisory Forum.
Kenneth Macintosh.
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that the Minister will re-emphasise a point he's already made. Does the Cabinet Secretary not recognise the outrage that will exist across the public sector but across Scotland at the above-average, above-inflation salary increases that have been awarded to senior management in universities? In particular, these are already the highest-paid public servants in Scotland. 2 of them have received increases of 11% and 24%. He talks about his own review chaired by Professor von Pronzinski. In that review, it called for remuneration committees, which agreed the salary levels, to include both members of staff and university students to increase transparency. Why has he not actually implemented this proposal?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, the Code of Governance that was accepted by the universities at the end of that process makes it clear that there should be transparency in salary setting. There are issues about involvement of executive directors, essentially in business terms, on boards, salary boards, and therefore I think it is better that this is undertaken by independent voices. But I do not support or endorse what has taken place. I make that clear. And if principals, as they do from time to time, ask my private advice on what they should do, my advice is unequivocal. They should do what ministers in the Scottish Government have done. They should do what has been done right across the public sector. They should make sure that they show both restraint and leadership. And they certainly should not allow themselves to be awarded pay increases massively out of step with those salary terms and conditions that are being offered to their staff. I can't be any clearer than that unless the member wants me to nationalise every Scottish university. But I seem to remember his accusations were that I was interfering too much rather than too little.
Ken-Macintosh.
I have to say, Presiding Officer, to hear Mr Russell's private advice when we're talking about public funds is not acceptable to this Parliament. This is a public matter. We are talking about £500 million of public money going to these institutions. Now, can I just ask the Cabinet Secretary why he thinks he cannot intervene in this matter? He's quite prepared, for example, to intervene in local authorities and set class sizes at a national level when he's giving local authorities which are democratically elected, giving them public funds. In this case, it's not as if this is the first time. We had a report out last year which identified more than 8,500 people on 0 hours contracts in the university sector. My own FOI last year revealed that severance pay over the last few years in the universities alone has amounted to £110 million, 34 million of that spent on compulsory redundancies. Now, if the Cabinet Secretary believes he has a role in this, I believe he should act, and in particular he should act on high pay. Is it a case that he can't act or that he won't act?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member's indignation no doubt does him credit, but what it doesn't do is address the practicalities of this issue. I repeat, universities are autonomous institutions. It's not a difficult concept. In those circumstances, universities are entitled to make their own decisions. What we need to do is to show leadership in this matter. This Parliament showed leadership on pay restraint, and very effectively too. Though those bodies for which we are responsible and can control, we also showed that, though I have to say most of those, virtually all of those bodies were willing to follow it. I think that institutions that are entirely free to make their own decisions should remain free to make their own decisions. And I challenge the member again, if he wants us to nationalise universities, say so. But I am unequivocal in my view that what we have seen is unacceptable. I've made that clear. I'm also unequivocal in my view that where I am asked for my advice, I give that advice. And here I am giving it in public too, in case those principals who have not asked for that advice now decide to do so. It is unacceptable to allow salary increases to get so out of step with what is available to the staff of universities. I do hope that message is being heard loud and clear. If the member now wishes to move to bring forward legislation to nationalise every Scottish university, let him do so. Otherwise, join with me in being clear and unequivocal in your view.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. I have a number of indications for supplementary questions. Can I say to members who wish to ask a supplementary question, the question is on the pay of university principals. So I'm not prepared to go wider than that. So if that's not your question and you want to withdraw, then I'm sure you're going to press the button. Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There has been understandable interest and concern around the recent announcement of pay increases, and I think that is inevitable going forward. But although staff and students aren't represented in the way that Ken-Macintosh alluded to on the Remuneration Committee, the decisions of that committee are indeed scrutinised and decided upon by the governing bodies under the new code. And perhaps he could indicate to Parliament what his expectations are of that process going forward in terms of the rate of increase of principals' pay in future.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you for that question. I think that's a reasonable question, and the reasonable answer is I've made it absolutely clear. I think that those who are in charge of setting these terms and conditions, those who are on university courts or elsewhere, need to make it clear that they do not believe that pay for senior staff, principals and other senior staff, should run massively out of step with that available to other members of staff, and particularly in terms of increases. At a time when increases are being restricted to very low levels indeed, if any increase at all, then that is the right thing to happen for those at every level of universities, not a rule for one and no rule for another.
Mary Scanlon.
Thank you. I acknowledge the point made about the remuneration committees. However, does the Cabinet Secretary expect that the principal of the University of the Highlands be paid on a par with other university principals in Scotland when the principal of each UHI further education colleges has significant responsibilities?
Cabinet Secretary.
That is a decision for the autonomous institution, and I stress this again. I do remember in the debates on the Post-16 bill, there was an attempt to criticise me virtually every time I stood up on the grounds that I was trying to interfere with universities and with colleges. There are decisions, many decisions, that these autonomous institutions are entirely free to take. We see from the published table where the salary is of the principal of the University of the Highlands and Islands. It is for that university. The issue here is not comparative rates. The issue is the freedom of the universities and colleges, and also what they do year on year. And as the table shows, some are showing commendable restraint, some there is no increase, some it is a very modest increase, some appear to be very substantially out of kilter with what the norm presently is, and that is the issue to which we should address ourselves, and that is the issue which I have no hesitation in saying is unacceptable.
Thank you. That ends topical questions. The next item of business is a debate on motion number 8577.